Mr. Nandakumar's is switched off, I think.
Is switched off, yes.
He's on. Yeah.
So we are starting now. Good evening to all of you and welcome to Business Line Knowledge Series. Today's webinar is on the topic, will banks see a second wave of NPAs? It's a question which many people, not only policymakers and finance professionals, but also citizens from all walks of life with their hard-earned savings parked in banks, are keen to know about. And to discuss this issue, we have an eminent panel of industry leaders and experts. Mr. Shyam Srinivasan, Managing Director and CEO, Federal Bank, a veteran banker, he has experience with leading multinational banks in India, Middle East, and Southeast Asia. Our next panelist is Mr. VP Nandkumar, Managing Director and CEO of Manappuram Finance, one of the country's leading NBFCs and the pioneer of the institutionalized model of the gold loan business in the country. Last but not the least, Mr. Krishnan Sitaraman, Senior Director, Financial Sector Ratings and Structured Finance Ratings at CRISIL. He oversees credit rating assignments for banks, NBFCs, housing finance companies, and insurance firms. I'm pleased to say that we have nearly 2,000 registrations for this webinar. And we hope that you will like the discussion that we have planned ahead for you. I would also like to thank our panelists for joining us. The banking and financial sector has witnessed tumultuous times in the last 2 years. And just when we thought that the situation was about to settle down, the COVID-19 pandemic and resultant economic uncertainties have led to a fresh set of challenges for the country as well as for the sector. The IMF in its latest forecast has projected the Indian economy to contract by 4.5% in 2020, though it expects some sort of a recovery next year with a 6% growth rate. Much would, however, depend on how the pandemic further unravels and how far the infection can be controlled. The RBI's Monetary Policy Committee, which has already met twice, has unveiled a number of measures to improve liquidity as credit demand has been weak. The Central Board of the RBI also met today. While banks and NBFCs have already made COVID-related provisions in the fourth quarter of 2019-20, it is likely that they would have to make more. The real picture may only come out when the loan moratorium ends in September. Earlier in May this year, CRISIL had said that banks' gross NPAs will rise by 150 to 200 basis points from 9.5% in FY20 to about 11 to 11.5% in FY21. Moreover, with the government stimulus package also depending to a large extent on the liquidity support from banks, it could throw up a set of whole new challenges for the sector. Today, there's been a lot of talk about a one-time loan recast. So that's something again that we are looking at. Let me now start what promises to be a very lively and engaging discussion, which will be followed by a question and answer session for our listeners. There's no crystal ball, but can I start by asking our panelists that how do you perceive this fiscal year to go ahead? Do you expect more stress coming up, and do you think that FY21 is lost in terms of new business? Mr. Shyam Srinivasan, can I please start with you, sir?
Thank you, Surbhi, and good afternoon to everybody. It is quite an interesting way to engage through a web connection and meeting so many of you. Hello, everybody. Your question, like you said, you need a crystal ball to answer that. But I would say, I don't think all is lost. We should not view the year as a lost case. Yes, there are challenges. We are dealing with an extremely unwelcome guest. Nobody had prepared for anything like this. And therefore, the reactions that all of us are giving to this are more intuitive. As we go along, we're learning more and reacting to the situation. My own view, while the challenge is enormous and to a large extent, we don't have a history of how to deal with this, nor is there a textbook reaction to this. So we have to figure out the best and more sensible way to deal with it as we sort of discover the problem and the solutions that go along with it. Will it be all bad? I don't believe so. Will there be challenges? For sure, yes. But I think you also mentioned the IMF forecast, and so have many other forecasts, talking about this year being, -3, 4, 5, whatever, but the subsequent year being 6, 7. And I think we have to take our horizon up to over 2 financial years or 2 calendar years, whichever that's is more appropriate, and try to look at life beyond just this period. Otherwise, we'll get too caught up in, will this quarter be bad? Will the next quarter be bad? It was going to be. And like you also said, till September, the current moratorium may not, you won't get a great sense of how things are going to shape up. That's half the year already over, right? So you have only half of financial year 21 to deal with. So we have to sort of look beyond just the immediate 6, 9 months, look out at 18, 24 month kind of horizon. And then a lot of planning has to be done to deal with both the current challenge, but how does every institution come back more meaningfully and participate in what certainly will be a bounce back. Now, whether it's a V, U, L, swoosh, God knows. I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. It's only an estimation. So the answer to your question is to FY21 a lost case. I would argue we should not look at just FY21. We have to look at it as a continuum. Are there going to be near challenges? Yes. Undimensioned. I am not of the school that believes everything is gone. I do believe there are challenges, but I also believe there are a lot of opportunities that will come up. And at this point in time, to draw my favorite analogy to sport, is to just put your head down and play the difficult overs. There will be opportunities to score your 4s and 6s. And I'm quite confident that in not very far from now, the narrative will change more constructively.
That's a very optimistic picture you have. Mr. Nandkumar, can I get your views? Because the NBFCs are dealing with their own challenges when this pandemic.
Voice is not audible.
We can.
Hello, Mr. Nandkumar.
Yeah. Yeah, now it is audible.
Yes. So we were. Yes, we wanted to know your perspective, Mr. Nandkumar, on how do you perceive FY21? Mr. Srinivasan has a very optimistic view, which is very good to hear in these times.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to talk for this good audience and panelists. So I heard the optimistic view of Mr. Shyam Srinivasan. But the challenge what I see is we are not seeing the end of the tunnel. Even during the bad days of demonetization and other situations, we could easily see the end of the tunnel. Now, whether the tunnel is longer, no idea. That is the problem. So, with there are reports that this virus attack is going to be more grave mid August, early September, etc., etc. I don't know what is the situation going to be if that is the case. That is the worrisome thing. Now, with this continued lockdown, even unlock 1 year started. But the unfortunate thing is, in many of the cities today, even in rural areas, many of the markets today, again, the lockdown has started. So this is the situation. The good part is the monsoon is expected to be normal or slightly above normal, which will lead to a situation of the agricultural activities picking up. If the investment is there in infrastructure and other activities, that also will pick up. In such a situation, the rural pickup will be better. So still, the major challenge here is the mindset. Already the working capital cycle of the MSME is broken. To come back, how many of them will be able to do is the very big question. So all depends on the packages available from the government. But what is the most packages available? All depends on that. Because what the emphasis needed is how to revive the sentiment for the common man. So otherwise, the situations yeah, will not be under the control. So what I feel is, if there is no recurrence, continued recurrence with more intensity, things will be under control. As Mr. Shyam has said, the situations will be under control, the things will improve. If that is not the case, there is a bigger challenge. So I hope that more packages will come from the government to boost the sentiment also. There will be the government investments will be there, government spending will be there. So that the MSME, which is the backbone of the and agriculture, which are the backbones of Indian economy. If it is revived, the sentiment is brought back, then things will go well.
Mr. Sitaraman, can you tell us something? You're the crystal gazer for us in this session, if I may say so.
First of all, very good afternoon to everyone. Thank you, Surbhi and Business Line, for having me on the show. Very good afternoon to Mr. Srinivasan as well as Mr. Nandakumar and all of you who have tuned in. I'd like to start by saying that we are in a very unprecedented situation today. So if you look at the situations which have coalesced, so for instance, we are having this entire public health emergency, so as to say, which has kind of morphed along with the economic challenges, the economic activity coming down sharply, as well as the financial markets getting impacted. All these three coming together, very rarely we have seen in living memory. I think maybe last it happened was in the Great Depression of the 1930s. Subsequent to that, whether it be the global financial crisis, demonetization, or anything you talk about, we don't have all these issues or stress points coming together at the same time. That said, if we look at the economic activity or the economic growth today, going by what Mr. Srinivasan said, that one shouldn't look at this year in isolation. I agree with that. What we should look at is a slightly medium-term horizon. And also within this year, break it up into quarters. So the way I would look at it is the quarter one, that is April to June, would be the most stressed period. And with the lockdowns getting released in many parts, yes, in some parts they're getting reimposed. But with lockdowns more or less getting released, economic activity slowly coming back. And what we will need to see is when this medical cure comes in, either in terms of a medicine or in terms of a vaccine. And then with that, what will be the spread, intensity, and duration of the pandemic? So assuming that we will not see too much of an elongation beyond Q2, we should see some element of pickup happening from second half of this fiscal, with both economic activity coming in as well as some of the pent-up demand which will be there in various consumer segments that will come in. So we are having a GDP growth forecast of -5% for this fiscal. But for next fiscal, we are looking at close to 8.5%, which is a big delta from where we are today. And two key reasons for that: we believe that the pent-up demand will continue into next fiscal. And we believe that the low base effect of this fiscal would help in the next fiscal. So we are a little more kind of looking at going forward. This first quarter, we expect a -25% degrowth. And then slowly things will come back on track is what we believe. That's our base case estimate. There are always risk factors, like if the epidemic or the pandemic extends beyond what we are expecting today, if there are some global risk factors which come in. So all those are risk factors, but as a base case estimate, we expect a -5% this fiscal, followed by an 8.5% for next fiscal.
And when we talk about sectors, which are the sectors where you see, a faster revival compared to other sectors, Mr. Sitaraman?
Okay, so if we have done an analysis across 35 odd sectors where banks typically have exposure to, and CRISIL also has ratings on. We have ratings on more than 10,000 odd companies in India. So if I look at various sectors, we actually looked at it in two parts. One is what is the impact on demand on those segments. So essentially companies which are in the discretionary space, they are getting impacted most, and companies or sectors which are in the essential services segment, they are getting impacted less. And on this, what we also need to put in is, or superimpose, is the balance sheet strength of the entities in this sector. So you may be in a sector which has got impacted, but at the same time, if you are having a good balance sheet, low level of leverage and good liquidity, you will be able to tide over the situation reasonably better. So having said that, if we look at the sectors which would be under more of a stress, we believe sectors like real estate, aviation, auto dealerships, gems and jewelry, steel, these would be some of the sectors which will fall in that category. And sectors which will be relatively less impacted would be sectors like pharmaceuticals, FMCG, fertilizers, IT, telecom, and so on. And what we will see is the rest of the sectors will come somewhere in between. So that's a broad overview.
Mr. Srinivasan, can you tell us a little more about which segments of your portfolio you expect to revive quickly and in what time space?
I'll build on what Krishnan was saying.
Right.
The obvious choice is that which is sort of a must-have consume are the sectors that will see less or no impact. And then there's a huge spectrum as it goes along. Certainly areas that are longer tenor, infrastructure, those that can be deferred will be deferred, right? So I don't think there is any different from what he said, but I do believe there will be winners in every sector. We should not paint with the same brush the entire sector, right? There are the AAAs in every sector who will, I think through this process, you will see some kind of concentration of market share where the very good players will start gaining, or the more structured, organized, efficient players will start gaining, whichever category, right? And therefore, in my mind, sectors, yes, like he pointed out, there are sectors will certainly will have greater natural advantage, but even in the relatively higher stressed sector, or a relatively in a hierarchically, if it's not extremely stressed, there will be very good players in them who will begin to consolidate demand. We must remember it's not a complete demand destruction across sectors. It is in some sectors demand is there, in some sectors it's demand deferral, in some sectors it is demand consolidation, and in some it's demand destruction. So we have to figure it out. In the obvious choice, pharma, medical will do extremely well. Telecom, the way we are all connecting, we didn't do a few months ago. So those are obvious choices. Food consumption will happen, right? So the whole food processing industry will do. Organized retail versus the kirana shop, there's a big debate going on. And there may be again some polarization that is happening. A logistics business will do well. If you want delivery happening at your doorstep, logistics will do well. Home care related sectors will do much better than you going out and doing, right? And in most markets, wherever business has already started, I can already see some demand which we didn't expect beginning to come back. If you take markets like Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, of course, the last 10 days is shut, but when it had revived, or some parts of Delhi when it was a little more active, certainly you saw larger demand for used cars and two-wheelers. So therefore, the loaning for that increased. And Mr. Nandakumar is there, nobody better than him to talk about the whole gold loan space is exploding, right? So I think the demand will come back in stages. Some sectors will be almost a natural choice. Some will be winners within a sector. And like Krishnan said, there will be on the spectrum, there'll be some players in the middle of it. But I do believe every category will have a AA, AAA kind of player who will gain share and will consolidate, and those that are efficient will win.
Mr. Nandakumar, what is your view on this issue?
Yeah, I fully agree with that. Even in bad times, there will be winners. In every sector, there will be winners. Yeah. So at the expense of the weak ones, the stronger ones will definitely gain and emerge stronger. So a lot of consolidations could happen. So maybe lot of, you can see lot of mergers. The weaker ones may perish. So when I say that, we are well capitalized, and also where their overall efficiency, if they can put into such institutions, will definitely come up very successfully at the expense of the weak.
I think Surbi is struggling. All your panelists are tending to concur with one another. Surbi, you have a problem. You need some varying views. Krishnan should be provoked to say different things now.
No, I've kept the rough questions are going to follow. Right now I'm just getting.
Surbi, I'd just like to add something. Is
Yes.
just to what Mr. Nandakumar and Mr. Srinivasan said. Again, just remembered Mr. Srinivasan's mention that you shouldn't paint everyone in the same brush in the sector. I completely agree with that. Even if you go sectorally, what is important to notice today is rural India is relatively less impacted as compared to urban India. Most of the impact through this pandemic is coming in certain major urban centers. And there are huge swaths of the country which are not that much impacted. In fact, even in our GDP growth projection, this is the first year after 40 years, we are expecting a negative growth. However, even within that, we expect the agri segment to actually show a positive growth of 2.5%. It is a non-agri segment which is bringing the overall growth down. So we do expect agri and allied activities to do relatively better. So rural India should be one of the support factors for growth this year.
Okay, that's great. So, Mr. Nandakumar, when we speak about rural India, etc., so and except for certain bigger urban areas where we're seeing more impact of the pandemic, how do you see demand coming up? And also, once the loan moratorium gets over, how do you see, your portfolio?
So the rural demand, as the other speakers have told, the rural demand is definitely better because even lockdown was not that impacted. Small businesses, small activities were going on in many of the areas. And now when the major cities are under lockdown, this unlock also has helped. The transportation, everything has started. So the morale of the people is better today in rural area. So monsoons have commenced. Monsoons. So some infrastructure development is happening, etc., in some states. So not only that, through NREGA programs, the money has come, etc., etc. So some activities are there. The sentiments also. So that's the situation as far as the rural India is concerned.
And in terms of the moratorium, what impact do you see on your loan portfolio once it gets over?
So we are relatively comfortable because 70+% of our loan portfolio is gold loan. So where the demand is moderate. So why the demand is moderate? There is the gold prices have gone up. Because of that, there is a tendency to monetize the collateral by the customers. So there is a good demand for scrap also. So the jewelers and scrap dealers are very active, prompting them. So there is some liquidation for them. So, but still, the gold loan portfolio is good. But the other portfolio, the other 30% of the portfolio, 20% of the portfolio is microfinance, where the collections are improved. It is this month we may collect around 65%. Next month we expect that to go to around 90%. That's a trend because there are many people even during the moratorium. The MFI customers, many of them don't want to avail. So that's the situation. So the other segments we are in is affordable housing. There the collections are over 90% now. The vehicle portfolio, these are ours is a small vehicle portfolio. So there also the collections appear to be maybe around 75-80% this month. So overall, since the gold remains stable and upward looking, we are relatively in a better position.
Mr. Srinivasan, how is the bank doing and what is your expectation after the moratorium ends?
I'll tell you, this is like you said right at the beginning, it's anybody's guess, right? But
Right.
I look at it in the following ways. One is, in any credit situation, one is the ability and the second is the intent. Till February 29th, everybody had the right intent. Suddenly, intent doesn't change, right? Only capability changes. So most banks or most companies who are lenders make the best effort to pick people whom they are most comfortable, have an intent, and then the capability is a given. Now, what is impaired is capability because different sectors, like we spoke, different categories of people will have different credit challenges. But again, you have to break it into secured and unsecured. Right? So unsecured with low intent is the worst part of any portfolio.
That's true.
In my own bank's case, unsecured with low intent is hopefully a very low amount. So I want to believe that we have largely a secured business because our gross NPA was never more than 3%.
Right.
So our belief is that people suddenly don't become bad, and we have got reasonable security, and therefore over a period of time we should all be able to solve. Now that cannot be extrapolated across the industry. It will vary from institution to institution. But like I said earlier, if this pandemic related issues start tapering off over the next few months, and the security that we hold is in reasonably good shape, then the ability to recover over a longer horizon should be dealable. We must keep in mind, I know Mr. Nandakumar is the champion at it, Indians have 25,000 tons of gold. That's $1.2 trillion, 40% of India's GDP.
That's true.
Right? All of us. Now we have to figure out if you don't have the money, you will find the way to pay them. If the intent is there, we'll take that gold and monetize it. So I do believe that situation is dealable, provided your book has been well crafted, well chosen, and the security is reasonably well documented. So I'm not trying to say that this is not a problem. I'm only saying that it is a problem that can be dealt with as long as you have not done some heady, unsecured, random lending, which I don't believe most banks have done. Certainly not us.
Banks are known to be conservative largely. So.
Should be, right?
Mr. Sitaraman, will CRISIL be reviewing the NPA projections at some time?
Yeah, Surmi, this is an ongoing process. We are looking at it from time to time. And we believe that more or less what you had pointed out earlier, we would be around that level. Maybe 50 basis points here or there could change. So, but we are looking into the matter. The key thing to be noted since we made that projection was that this extension of moratorium which has happened till August. And if that be the case, so you will not see NPAs kind of going up till September or so. It is only after that, because there is a standstill in the aging of the loans as well. So it is only after, in the second half of the year, we expect NPAs to start moving up. At the same time, we are hearing talks of one-time restructuring also doing the rounds. And if that comes into the picture, then we don't know how this will pan out. We'll have to look at which are the loans, which are the sectors where restructuring is happening. Because once the loans get restructured, they again won't add to the NPAs. So our key two aspects which we are looking into the NPAs were, yes, slippages will be higher because of the challenges that the economy is facing. Number two is the denominator effect also. We expect credit growth to be lower this fiscal than in the past, which is in line with economic activity being subdued. So both the numerator will be higher and the denominator will be lower. So that way the NPAs should go up. But you have to keep in mind that we had seen a peaking of NPAs in March 2018, where for the banking system, we had an NPA, gross NPA of around 11.5%. That came down to around 9.4% as of March 2019. And we're expecting it to be around 9% as of March 2020. So even if this goes up, you still it should not be too much higher than what we've already seen in March 2018. So that's a broad indication.
Okay. And when we talk about the one-time loan recast, how is it expected to help and how should it be different from previous efforts like this in the past? Who would like to start with this?
Yeah, let me go.
Yes.
No, I think, see, the discussion has always been, if you do a deep restructuring, yes, the idea is very good and customers will benefit, but will both customers and financial institutions misuse it? I think that's the concern that people have. And whether there is going to be some delayed recognition, or are we sort of sweeping it under the carpet? There's a lot of learning that has come into everybody, the regulator, the financial institutions, the borrowers themselves. And therefore, today the level of transparency is very high to try and sweep something under the carpet. That's one. The second, in earlier instances, the event that created the problem was not such a global environment-led, health-led economic disaster. Those were very economic and less of any other parameter. So to that extent, the situation is different, the transparency higher, therefore you can make some more confident decisions around restructuring. I also believe there may be different types of restructuring allowed for the worst impacted sectors. Nobody will argue airline, travel, tourism, certain sectors are extremely damaged. Right? So maybe they'll get a different kind of restructuring package and the less stressed sectors may not get. That could be one. Second, the financial treatment of the restructuring can be very different. I mean, if you are restructuring an account in a particular category, if you are normally providing X, you may provide 1.5X. So the accounting treatment makes sure nobody is misdoing, but the customer has a chance to revive and the industry comes back. So I think there will, in the hands of the regulator, there are many tools available to announce restructuring by segment, by sector, the level of financial provisioning that needs to be done, tenor of restructuring, how do you treat it? If it's restructured once, it can't be restructured another time. I am sure the people have learned a lot of lessons and therefore it's not, I don't think it's a bad word. The big R is not a bad word. Not thought through properly. I do believe it can be done and I'm sure something meaningful will come.
And Mr. Who would like to go ahead with this next now is my question.
My point is, yes, I agree with that. My point is, it should be done because the business, overall, the business has come to a very low level. The sentiments are also low. The turnover has come to a low level. The cash flow is impacted. So in such genuinely impacted cases where the cash flows can be revived, then the repayments can be revived. This restructuring shall be done. There is no other way.
Okay. So it's something which will help both the customers as well as the banks to some extent, I would believe.
Yeah.
So the way I would look at it is that the modalities are important. And as Mr. Srinivasan pointed out, there is always in restructuring a moral hazard as to how this will be misused, whether it will be misused. And we have seen that happening in the past. In the pre-IBC days, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code days, there used to be different types of restructuring programs and schemes. And that used to be, for certain cases, a way to take refuge under, even though it may not be a deserved case. So how that is being addressed would be key. Yes, there will be a number of accounts where they are genuinely impacted by the economic situation today. And suitable restructuring would help both parties. But that needs to be looked into as to what are the modalities and how it is ensured that it is not misused.
One other issue which seems to be a little troubling is, at least to me as a journalist, is, this announcement about the suspension of the corporate insolvency resolution filing for 6 months. Will loan recovery suffer? Mr. Srinivasan?
No, I think, see, certainly it's a very efficient tool that the banks had to resolve. But there is also a compelling reason why they've sort of suspended it. Because of the current developments in the environment, and it places an onerous task on everybody to conduct that process, initiate that process, and conduct that process. So yes, it is a near-term, I would say, disincentive. But the current environment being what it is, you don't have much of a choice. Right? So we just have to hope that the people realize by not paying, they're only worsening the situation when the environment improves. Right? So we may as well get the bad news out early.
Then you can plan more for the future.
The days are gone when you can pretend and extend, as they say. Right? You have to deal with issues as they come. And it's best done when it happens rather than believing it's going to go away. So I think that's why, yes, this is a dampener, but it's an unfortunate reality. We're dealing with, I don't want to say the word unprecedented. Everybody said it many times, but we are dealing with unprecedented situation. So yes, don't have an answer beyond that.
Mr. Sitaraman, how do you perceive this?
Yeah, so if we look at it, I don't think we can see it in isolation. There is an economic situation, a challenge that we are seeing today, and the entire economy has been impacted. But the way I would like to put it is, this is one more step which has been announced in conjunction with several others. There is a stimulus package, there is a package for MSMEs, there is a package for NBFCs, and there are this for the rural agriculture area, for the coal sector, there is a package. So a number of packages have been announced, and this is one such package. And this is to kind of prevent proceedings being initiated against companies which are genuinely under difficulty. And if this process were to be executed, those companies may probably get into the liquidation mode. But having said that, IBC has been a path-breaking reform in the entire recovery and NPA resolution process in India. And we've seen recoveries going up, the timelines getting shortened. In fact, before the IBC process, on an average, it used to take close to 5 years to recover from NPAs, and the recovery rate was around 25%. Whereas if you see the last 2 to 3 years, you've seen recovery rates go above 40%. So the point is, there are initial kind of steady progress that we've made under this legislation. And also the other important benefit that I see is a change in credit culture. So especially the willful defaulters who otherwise were merely taking bankers for a ride, so as to say earlier, now they really know that their company is at stake and then they can lose their company. So a large number of them, if they have the ability to pay, they're actually coming to the negotiating table, ending up paying. So that way, I think there is a steady improvement in credit culture, borrower behavior, which is happening, which is to the credit of the code. But yes, the current situation for some period that has been put on the back burner, probably it is in line with the overall package and the economic stimulus.
Okay. And Mr. Nandakumar, yes. When we talk about lending and, demand for credit, what is it that you're seeing?
So the demand has come down. We have seen the demand has come down. The demand has not picked up. I think what we hope is by the middle of the next month, the demand should pick up. The only worry is what is going to the pandemic, will it get extended? That's the only worry. Otherwise, with the rural, with the agriculture, everything has started. The demand is on the rise only. So we have seen the demand very low, but what we see of late is it is slowly picking up.
Okay. Mr. Srinivasan, will banks be willing to lend, or are they going to be very risk averse right now?
Both will be true. we will be willing to lend, but we should be cautious, right? I think, see again, Surbhi, this one, the way it works, at least as the way I see it is, because of the fact that, like I mentioned, through any cycle, there will be winners and losers in any segment. The rate of incremental growth is what is slowing down in credit.
Right.
Within that, like Mr. Nandakumar mentioned and Sitaraman mentioned, the businesses around anything that has an consumer bias, consumption bias, will begin to see some kind of demand. Second, I really think, and I'm saying this because I think people have the right intent, they will use existing security to take a loan to pay down something else. So there will be a demand for products like gold loans, which is evident, right? And then as people come back to work, maybe slowly, we have now should see the whole story not as it was 100 in February, has it become 120 in July? You have to see it became 100 to 25, has 25 become 30, 35, 40? That is how you have to see it. If you start comparing with February's 100 and say it is not 120, then we will say everything is collapsed. We have to see, has 25 become 35, become 45 by end of the year, then we are saying on the right path. Because I keep saying right from the beginning, this is an 18, 24 month story you have to look at. In that context, it will come back. Again, it will be mixed. Anything that has very high commitment of capital, any high commitment of tenor, those will be slower. But businesses that have more immediate requirement to meet their client requirements will begin to see. And we are seeing some pockets of it. And I do believe if the recurrence is not at scale and it sort of begins to taper off by July, August, I do believe by September, this 25, 35, 45 will start going to at least 75 by end of the year.
By end of the year.
That's what I would say.
Okay. So a sort of recovery by July is what everyone is expecting. Is that to say?
Humble start, slowly sort of increasing. And by end of the year, should gather momentum. Is what I would believe.
Okay. Mr. Sitaraman, what do you believe on this issue?
Yeah, so it's a function of a couple of things as to how long this lockdown will be and what kind of relaxations happen. So we are definitely seeing from June 1st, when many of the lockdown measures were eased, there have been an improvement in the economic activity, and branches are getting opened, activities are happening, and there is demand happening. See, for instance, certain companies are saying that our business in the first few, I would say, I don't have the facts and figures, but purely on an anecdotal basis, when we talk to clients, they say that the demand has come to say 60% of pre-COVID levels or 70% of pre-COVID levels in the first few weeks of June. So as if the lockdown is not there, then there is a support to the economic activity. So we'll have to see how that pans. And in all of this, as I said earlier, the spread, intensity and duration of COVID, the pandemic, will be very important. And how, if we are quickly getting out of it, then the recovery process will start. I would just want to say that I don't think anybody can accurately predict the future. But if you can look at the past track record in India, if you go back, say, 30 years, 40 years, and see economic cycles, there have been up cycles, there have been down cycles. But by and large, what has happened is, because Mr. Srinivasan took a cricket analogy earlier, I will take a cricket analogy. It looks like more like a test match. When the up cycle you compare with the first innings and the down cycle with the second innings. Typically in a test match, you will see the first innings, more runs are scored, and the first innings, more runs are scored, and it lasts for a greater time than the second innings. So that's what we see in India also. When there is an up cycle, it extends for a longer time and is relatively more intense than a down cycle. But yes, one will be followed by the other. That we are today seeing a down cycle, and probably it is more intense than some of the other down cycles. But what goes up, what goes down has to go up. So we are hopeful that at some point of time, this too will pass and we will come back to recovery.
That's a great thought. So my last question for the panel before we open up to questions is that, the RBI and the finance ministry, they've been, over the last 2.5 months, they've been coming out with a series of announcements for the sector, be it on liquidity or other issues. So what is next on your wish list? And who would like to start with this answer now?
Can I start?
Yes, of course, sir.
Yeah. I have a few wish lists. One, when the NBFCs and banks can lend without security. Why? In gold loan, there is a 75% cap on LTV. This is one thing. Then the second thing, that cap shall be removed. So if we are taking a risk beyond 75%, so additional capital requirements, the CRAR ratio can be changed, can be higher, it can be much higher than that, but it should be allowed. The second thing, there is a regulatory arbitrage, between banks and NBFCs. The banks, yes, for small gold loans, their capital requirement is risk weight is 0, whereas for an NBFC it is 100%. So this shall be removed. Then around 30% of the agri portfolio of the banks put together is gold loan. Whereas we don't get any priority sector advantage for that. This should be considered. Another thing, the securitization.
Right.
Because as it is not a structured loan, the securitization is not permitted because minimum seasoning period, there are other conditions. Earlier we were pleading for that. Because now, as the NBFCs, we have a reach out. And the sector, as Mr. Chairman has said, 25,000 tons of gold or 30,000 of 35,000 tons of gold. That's the estimated gold with the families in India. So that monetizing that is very important, and the NBFCs have a good reach out. Now the bigger part of these such loans are going to unorganized sector. The lack of transparency, high rate of interest. In order to bring back these the customers here to the organized sector, these are required, which will improve the liquidity of NBFCs. These are some of my wishes.
No, these are very pertinent points, and I think it's the need of the hour. Mr. Srinivasan, what is it that you would like next from the government and RBI, or hope for?
Yeah, one thing that, like all of us have been speaking about, there is an expectation around the restructuring. So certainly the entire industry is looking to see what it is. I would only hope that if there is going to be a decision one way or the other, it's done earlier. Otherwise, it may lead to people just sitting on their, expecting something and not doing what they need to do. So some degree of finality will help. Whatever is the construct, whether it's deep, short, with caveats, which I guess there will be. I'd hope that it comes out, quite soon, so that people can, I believe in this whole thing of don't delay it if you can do it earlier. So other than that, I think they've made all the right moves. There's a lot of liquidity around.
That's true.
And I do believe the moratorium has served its purpose. The provisioning is very thoughtful. So I'm hoping that the one piece of the puzzle that can sort of complete this whole treatment on COVID would be what kind of restructuring plan that's going to come. And I guess something comes out in the near future, it will complete the picture, and then it's for the banks and customers to use it appropriately.
Mr. Sitaraman, what is your view? Because you would have a more comprehensive view across the sector.
Yeah, so as a rating agency, may not be appropriate for me to talk about a wish list. We are independent, neutral observers. But what I would like to kind of see is some of the measures which have been already announced, them to be efficiently implemented on the ground to ensure that the sectors and the segments, the constituencies where the benefits are expected to go to, they actually go through quickly. Because some of the times we have seen in the past that measures get announced, but the benefits actually don't flow down to the required segments. So that's what we hope and look forward to seeing happen. The measures being announced, actually the benefits quickly trickle down. The transmission is quite fast. The other thing I would also like to say, in terms of if I have a wish list, it would be for a cure or a vaccine to this pandemic to be found quickly. That would be a wish list for me.
I think that's on everyone's wish list. So yes, I think we all want to go back to the normal that we had at one time of traffic jams and everything included. So, so we'll start with the questions from our participants now. Mr. Nishant Kumar has asked that has amalgamation of banks reduced the risk of NPAs? If yes, which sectors have improved or likely to improve? If not, which sectors are still worse? So, who would like to take this question?
Crisil is the right person.
So I'll take a shot. I don't actually see this amalgamation materially impacting NPA levels, because NPA levels are coming in today from loans which have been originated in the past. So they are already in the books, and after a level of seasoning, they would fall into the NPA bracket if they are stressed in nature. But going forward, what we are seeing today is in the mega amalgamation or mega merger that we are seeing, the anchor banks, the banks in which the other banks are getting merged, are the larger and more stronger banks. The banks which are getting merged are the relatively weaker ones. So if we assume that on a steady state basis, after the merger is implemented, the processes and the policies which the anchor bank is following is what everybody will follow, then in that sense, there will be a better risk assessment and better credit assessment going forward. But I think also what we need to keep in mind is some of the structural developments which have been happening in the banking system, very clearly the IBC. Those measures which actually are ones which will actually help keep control over the NPAs. Yes, there may be a short-term increase, but on a steady state basis, when we get out of the pandemic, we will see that the IBC is playing an important role in keeping NPAs in a controlled manner.
Our next question is from Mr. Raja Mahendra Pratap, who asks that, like deposits, can we also think of insurance for loans? Mr. Srinivasan, would you like to take that?
So, is the question in terms of can
we think of insurance for loans? Insurance cover for loans.
I think for most products, it's at a price it's available. For example, the Mortgage Guarantee Corporation gives buy. So the mortgage, MRTA products that are there. So there are insurance covers for disability, loss of life, but it, like anything else, there's a price attached to it, right? In the case of deposits, the banks are absorbing that cost and therefore paying for that premium to DIGC. So likewise, on the credit side, it will get built into the price, or there'll be an exclusive insurance premium. But potentially, answer is yes.
Okay.
But I think if the question is going to be an NPA protection insurance, that is not a product, because the insurance company may go under if they were to offer a NPA protection.
I think that will be a tough one for them as well.
I think that's a challenge. Yeah.
Mr. Nandkumar, there's a question for you from Sony CL. Will increase in gold prices impact gold loans, and what is your outlook for gold prices going forward?
I hope the gold prices will go up. The prediction is from the current level of $1,760 per ounce. there is a likelihood that it will move up to nearly 2,000 in another 1 year. That is what I believe. That is what many believe. Regarding the impact, gold price impact on the gold loan, you have to see the customers wanted certain amount of money. They borrow based on their requirement only. Because the pledged gold, the redemption is their top priority. Because when people avail the loan, even men avail from the family avail the loan, there is always an invisible guarantee from the women form. Whenever the money comes, cash flow inflow comes, their first priority is redeeming the gold, which is very sentimental to them. So, with the gold price going up, there cannot be a big increase because they always think about their cash flow. So, our LTV, which was around nearly 68%. With the gold price going up, it has come down to average LTV has come down to 58%. It is going down with the gold price increase. That means the people are not taking advantage of the gold price because what is more important for them is redemption.
Yeah. Okay. We have another question from a retired gentleman, Mr. Ram Kumar, who has asked that should he worry about lower interest payout going forward?
I think the truth is, as interest rates come down, both sides, right, the lender and the borrower, will see a lower interest regime. The whole endeavor has been to keep inflation low and therefore to drive interest rates low, both for borrowers and for lenders, as in the depositors and the customers who are taking loans. So it is certainly an era of lower interest rates. Now the question is, in a country like ours, how low can interest rates go? At this point in time, the deposit rates, already a 1-year term is somewhere in the mid 5, early 5 kind of thing. With inflation being low, it's still positive for the customer. And that certainly will be the endeavor of the regulators. But we must be mindful that there are many parameters that play in interest rate, in arriving at what the interest rates are. Now, God forbid, the debate around interest on interest happens and the Supreme Court makes decisions. You will have very serious consequences, and therefore the interest rates for depositors will have to struggle. So I think there are many connected points that needs to be looked at, but the general trend is it is entering a period of lower interest rates, but that is also a desired state for the country. Right now, if you take some of the Western markets, people pay money to keep money in the bank.
Yeah,
right?
Negative interest rates.
I mean, we may not get to that stage in a hurry, but certainly interest rates, I don't believe 1-year term will go up to 7 and 8% in the near term. But then equally, inflation is also lower. So the real rates of interest may be still the same.
We also talk about cut in rates of small savings and EPF. So I think all that just follows. Yes. There's another question that, with the lowering of the sovereign ratings or the outlook, will it have any significant impact on banking operations? Mr. Sitaraman, would you take that?
Yeah, so the sovereign rating or the actions which have been taken, different agencies have taken a different action. Standard & Poor's actually reaffirmed the rating actually. Now, if you look at that, what does that rating represent, or who is using that rating? It is someone overseas who is investing in the dollar bonds or the overseas borrowings of Indian entities. They are the entities who are using those ratings. Whereas if you look at the banking operations in India, predominant portion of their asset or loan base is in domestic lending. So the point is that domestic loans, domestic credit ratings are assigned by domestic credit rating agencies. The overseas ratings are on the sovereign side. Yes, the immediate impact could be somewhat of a inching up in the interest rates of if we were to borrow abroad. But the amount borrowed abroad is not very substantial in the Indian context. And if you see, that also has to be seen in the context of global interest rates. as Mr. Srinivasan was pointing out, we are today in a regime of lowering interest rates. So you'll have to put both of that in conjunction. So net, the sovereign rating changes are only material if someone goes and borrows outside.
Fair enough. I think we'll take the last question now before we wrap up. Mr. Prakash has asked that, do you see a need for a bad bank to tackle NPAs? I throw the field open to all you gentlemen.
We'll give it to Mr. Krisul.
The point is, we have had ARCs. A bad bank is another name for a ARC in some way. So we've had a number of ARCs, 23, 24 ARCs have been in operation for some time now. One of the key issues that we have seen with them is the capital level is low for many of them. And that means their ability to buy out large ticket NPAs, that is limited. So whereas now what we are seeing is some of the NPAs, while the resolution process is on the corporate side through IBC and so on, the ability of existing ARCs to pick up large ticket exposures is limited. So if there is a national level, I don't use the word bad bank, I use the word national ARC. So national level large ARC, if it is there, then it can help kind of pick up some of the NPAs of the banking system. But again, the issue of moral hazard continues to be there. If there is an assurance that this company is there, it will pick up all the NPAs, then will it impact the credit origination or underwriting capabilities or processes of the banks themselves? So there has to be a carrot and stick approach. There has to be a disincentivization of inappropriate processes being followed. But there are merits in having a national level ARC in place. If these pitfalls can be taken into consideration, we have seen in Southeast Asia and in China, big ARCs being set up in place in the late 90s and subsequent to that, which have helped take care of the NPA problem to some extent in those countries. So yes, there are merits, but there are potential pitfalls as well.
I think that's been an idea which has been debated time and again, but no one has ever been able to reach a conclusion on this. So let me with this thank all of you for taking out your precious time and joining this webinar to speak on these critical issues. I'm sure our listeners and viewers have also got a lot of insights into many of these issues and, got answers to their questions. I'd also like to highlight how, the banks and financial sector, they've worked so hard during the coronavirus pandemic, and in a way they've also been the silent corona warriors, because it's been so reassuring for borrowers and customers to be able to go and meet someone or talk to someone and ensure that their money is safe. So with that, I would like to thank all of you once again, our participants as well as our panelists, and I wish you all a very good and relaxing weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Everybody stay safe. Thank you very much.
Have a great evening. Thank you.